Alright, YouTube, so we're back, of course, to talk about some Final Fantasy VII, and today we are discussing Jenova. This is something I've mentioned on the channel before, but it's probably been a while, but when it comes to the remake project, something I want, like, it's really, really high up on my list, is more, like, history and stuff like that when it comes to Jenova, but also the Ancients, because they kind of go hand in hand. Because at this point, FF7's been out for 25 years, right? But we really don't know much about them. We have some knowledge of what Jenova is after it crashed on the planet and what's done since then. And we have a little bit of history on the Ancients, but in the grand scheme of things, we don't really know anything. It's part of why that VR video we got in Remake was so insane when it first happened, just because we've never seen the Ancients or anything about them, what they look like, how they live their lives, but this VR video gave us that, right? We get to see how they dressed, how they live their lives, what their villages look like, the fact that they had like some sort of airships or something potentially. We see them manipulating Mako to turn it into materia. Now, when it comes to the Cetra, there's plenty of opportunities for them to give us a history lesson. Aerith could simply gain the knowledge from interacting with the planet. We already see her gaining a shit ton of knowledge in Remake Part 1. You then have the obvious locations of the Temple of the Ancients, and then, of course, the Forgotten City. Those are both locations where we could get a massive like lore dump, more than what we got with the original FF7. We can learn more about their history. Like, what happened, what were they like, what were they doing 2,000 years ago, prior to meeting Jenova, what were they doing whenever they were fighting Jenova, stuff like that. However, when it comes to the entity known as Jenova, I don't know how you really do a history lesson, because she just crash-landed on Gaia 2,000 years ago. She obviously just about wiped out the Cetra. They sealed her away at the North Crater, and then, thousands of years later, Professor Gas and the Shinra Company find her. Like, that's our history on the creature Jenova. Like, I want to know more, but there's really no way to know what she did prior to landing on Gaia unless she were to tell somebody. Like, and I don't know why she would do that, but she could. Maybe Sephiroth could know more about her because of his bond with her, his connection with Jenova. Maybe he would just do an exposition dump at some point. But outside of her telling somebody, the only possible way that we could really get information on Jenova would be maybe Aerith, if she were to come in contact with Jenova. Maybe something similar to how she gave visions to like Red 13 and Marlene to calm them down or whatever. Like, it could be something similar to that, where if Aerith were to come in contact with Jenova, maybe she sees what Jenova used to look like, what her home planet is, whatever the case. That'd obviously just be like a vision or a scene that's shown to us, the audience. Maybe Aerith could tell the group about it, but it's not something that needs to be important to the story, right? They don't need characters talking about Jenova's home planet. I'm thinking something along the lines of, if you happen to have seen the movie Color Out of Space that came out in 2019, there's characters that come in contact with the entity that's kind of taken over their area, and you get a vision of what's either its home planet, or at least a planet that it's taken over, but it's absolutely fascinating. It's otherworldly, it's cosmic, it's obviously Lovecraftian, which there's a lot of similarities between Lovecraftian stuff and Jenova. This is something I'd love to see. Something comparable to this when it comes to Remake, where we get to see Jenova's potentially home planet. And how that planet looks in the movie is somewhat how I could picture Gaia looking if Jenova were to succeed in destroying all life. It's just a barren wasteland. There's nothing except the entity that took over the planet. And what sort of sparked this video and this discussion was of another tweet I did somewhat recently, where I'm just kind of curious what Jenova's original true form looks like, because I don't know if we know that. Because the form that we've seen throughout like most of FF7, her within that gigantic tube in Mount Nibel is for the most part humanoid. There's obviously a bunch of extra shit that's very alien, obviously. But her actual body, or what seems to be her body, looks like a regular woman for the most part, right? And I find it hard to believe that that's what she looks like, and that's what she's looked like for thousands and thousands of years, right? That just doesn't make a lot of sense. Her being an alien species who comes from who knows where, who's been alive for who knows how long, who's taken over who knows how many planets, and taken form of who knows how many creatures. Like, I don't think that's what she looks like. For me, whenever I see this somewhat humanoid form of Jenova, what I think this is, and it may be confirmed somewhere, I don't know, that it's just her trying to mimic the Ancients. We know that she did this when she was there 2,000 years ago. She took on the form of their loved ones and shit. That's how she almost wiped out the Cetra. So at least for me, I think that that's potentially why she could look like this. Maybe she was trying to take on the form of a Cetra before they sealed her away or something like that. I don't know. It's also possible the devs wanted her to look like this. There's plenty of like media out there where they depict aliens as humanoid, bipedal, and shit like that. So it's possible that's the reason the devs did it, but at the same time, it wouldn't make a lot of sense for Jenova to have boobs. Like, we as humans have those, women have those to feed their young. There's a purpose for them. That's their only purpose. I doubt an alien needs boobs to feed their young. So if it's not her transitioning into a human before she got sealed away, then it's simply fan service, which I guess fair enough too. When it comes to the original Final Fantasy VII, we fight Jenova 4 separate times. 3 out of 4 times, she looks pretty much the same. Jenova birth, life, and death all look exactly the same, just essentially a palette swap, a color swap. That's kind of it, right? And even when it comes to Remake, I would say that Jenova Dreamweaver is pretty much a modern interpretation of that shape. So the fact that she goes to this particular form multiple times throughout FF7 and also Remake, you could argue that maybe that's her regular form. It's the form that she fights in the most, the form she takes the most. However, then there's the 4th fight we do with Jenova, which happens to be the final fight in the Northern Cave, right before we fight Sephiroth. It's the final form she takes, and it's very, very different from the previous 3. So you could argue, since it's the final fight with her, it's the final form that she takes, that maybe it's her true form, her original form. The wiki does describe this form as being composed of its remaining cells, and you can look at that 2 different ways. One being that it's the last bit of cells that she has. Maybe this is the only form that she could take with those cells. Or you can look at it the other way, that it's at the last bit of cells that she has. Let's take all my strongest form, my truest form, my realest form, what I usually look like, something like that. I don't know. A comparison I made on Twitter when it comes to Jenova is John Carpenter's The Thing, the 1982 fantastic fucking horror movie. The comparisons between them are so many that there's no way it's not intentional. Like, the devs 100% had to take inspiration from this movie when thinking of Jenova. So really quickly, I'll just list off a handful of the similarities between them. Alien life form, unknown origin, fell to the earth, sealed away for thousands of years, uncovered years later by humans, can take the form of living beings, can separate itself and fully function, and whenever it takes on your form, it knows your memories. Now, there are some differences. Obviously, in Jenova's case, the ancients actually sealed her away, whereas in the Thing's case, it just crash landed on the planet and just froze in the snow, essentially, for thousands of years, got buried in snow and ice and shit. In Jenova's case, she crash landed on the northern part of the planet, of course, the North Cave, the northern polar cap, or whatever you want to call it. And in the Thing's case, it crash landed in Antarctica, which is obviously the southern part of the planet. And also in the Thing's case, it has to actually assimilate you, take you over, infect you, kill you, and then it can take your form. Whereas in Jenova's case, she could just read somebody's memories and, take on the form of their loved one. So in that way, she's actually a little bit stronger. Now, putting aside the comparisons that we just made, the initial comparison I was making to the 1982 film is that I don't know if there's a true form of Jenova anymore, because in that movie, there's never, a form that the Thing creature ever goes to. It's always taking shape of something. It never is, just run around in this particular form that you see a few times. It's essentially just an amalgamation of all the things it's ever taken shape of, all the things it's ever infected. It's why later on in the film you see it grow a dog head off the side of its body, because earlier in the film, near the beginning, it's taken the shape of a dog. And also, at a certain part, there's a person that's infected, the head detaches from the body. That head then grows eyes and legs and starts crawling around and shit, because that's something it's done before. Now, that was my initial comparison, but actually looking into it, of course, Jenova is very different, because she can kind of just turn into whatever she wants to. She can just read your memories and turn into one of your loved ones to make you think that that's who she is. Plus, for the most part, we do see her in, one constant form, where in Mountain Bell, she's in that tube, and then in the Shinra building, she looks the same, but she's obviously missing a fucking head. And as we mentioned previously, she takes this particular shape multiple times when it comes to FF7 and also Remake, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's more Jenova fights going forward with the other 2 games, where she would take a very similar shape to Dreamweaver. So, given that, if I had to make a guess on what this is, it's one of 2 things. So, given the description of Jenova's synthesis, I don't think that that's her original form, because it talks about that it's just the last little bit of cells that she has left. That's the form that she's taken. I don't think that's it. I think it's the other form that she takes, the 3 we see in FF7 and also Dreamweaver. She reverts to this particular form multiple times, so maybe it's something familiar. It's what she used to look like. Or it's, of course, what she just looks like within the Mountain Bell, tube and shit. Now, I'm somewhat torn between these 2, but I lean more towards the boss fight shape that she takes, Jenova Life, Death, and Birth, and also Dreamweaver, because she reverts to that particular form multiple times. There's kind of got to be a reason for that, I would think. And also, like I said previously, the form that she is in the Mountain Bell and in the Shinra building, very humanoid. I just feel like that's not what an alien species would look like. That just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Also, the boobs. Let's not forget the boobs. Why would part of her look very, very human and then the rest of her is abstract and very alien, right? That doesn't make a lot of sense. That's why I think it's something else along the lines of her transitioning into a different form. But my dudes, that is going to be pretty much the video, so pass off to you guys, of course. When it comes to Jenova, what do you think her true form is? Do you think we've even seen it yet? That's another possibility. I guess there's a third option that we need to consider. We may have not seen her true form yet, even though she takes that particular form a lot of times, and then we see her other constant form. There's a very real possibility that we've not seen her true form yet, right? It goes back to that John Carpenter's The Thing comparison, where she's an amalgamation of a bunch of other things that she's taken shape of. Maybe the gigantic heart and the wing and the tube and the fucking humanoid form and shit. It's very possible that what we're seeing in Mountain Bell and in the Shinra building is just her, mixing a bunch of things that she's taken shape of together, and we've yet to see the true form. But again, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that we've seen that yet? Do you think that the boss fight shapes that she takes is her real form, the Shinra building's her real form, or are we yet to see it? My dudes, that is going to be the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you guys aren't going to see more Final Fantasy VII content. Turn on notifications, follow me on Twitter, @YT, at my Discord, links to my networks are in the description, and an outro. Later, guys.
Used to care what people thought, but but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine, or leave it like Cobain.